The massive council chamber floated in space above Viridian Prime, a planet that belonged to no one and everyone at the same time. Inside the station, representatives from 800 different species sat in circular rows that stretched up toward the transparent ceiling. Stars twinkled beyond the glass, cold and distant, much like the eyes of many delegates watching Ambassador Dae-jung as he stood at the center of the chamber. Dae-jung had served Earth for 40 years. His hair had gone gray in the service of keeping humanity safe among the stars. He wore his formal ambassador uniform, the blue fabric pressed crisp, medals from various diplomatic achievements lined across his chest. But today those medals felt heavy. Today felt different. High Chancellor Vextar slithered forward on his serpentine body. The Morvathian leader had ruled the council for 300 years, and his scaled face rarely showed emotion. But Dae-jung could sense the tension in the way Vextar's forked tongue flicked out between words. Ambassador Dae-jung. Vextar's voice echoed through translation devices that hung in the air like small floating orbs. The council has called this emergency session to address a growing concern. Your species has been expanding its military forces at an alarming rate. A holographic display materialized above the center floor. Images of human warships flickered into view, showing sleek vessels bristling with weapons. Marines in combat armor ran through training exercises. Massive cannons fired in simulation tests. Dae-jung kept his voice steady. Humanity has only built what we need to defend ourselves. The outer colonies have faced pirate raids for the past 2 years. We have lost civilian lives. We have a right to protection. Councillor Thane stepped forward, the crystalline being sparkled under the chamber lights, its body composed of living minerals that rang like bells when it moved. Protection is one thing, Ambassador, but your species has deployed experimental weapons that exceed peaceful intentions. Your tactical innovations disturb your neighbors. Dae-jung felt anger rising in his chest but pushed it down. Anger had no place in diplomacy. He glanced at the viewing screen where Admiral Bora watched from Mars Command. Even through the transmission, he could see the fire in her eyes. Bora had fought in the Outer Rim conflicts. She had seen good people die. She would not accept this quietly. Back on the station, more evidence appeared in the holographic display. Human ships engaging in aggressive maneuvers, war games that showed tactical superiority, a montage of human victories against pirates, border raiders, and attempted invasions. The evidence was damning, but not for the reasons the council claimed. Young diplomat Yoon Ji-woo sat in the observation gallery, her tablet glowing with encrypted messages she had intercepted earlier that morning. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the private communications between council members. The truth was there, hidden in coded language and careful phrasing. The council did not fear human aggression. They feared human competence. In the past century, humanity had resolved 14 border conflicts with minimal casualties. Other species took decades and lost millions to accomplish the same results. When pirates attacked human colonies, the response was swift and decisive. When the Zelkor Dominion tested human borders 3 years ago, they retreated after one battle, unwilling to face the cost of continued engagement. Humanity was efficient. Humanity was effective, and that terrified the established powers. Vextar raised one clawed hand and the chamber fell silent. The council has reviewed all evidence and testimony. We invoke the proportional defense doctrine, established 10,000 years ago to maintain galactic stability. Resolution 8472 is hereby proposed. Humanity must dismantle 80% of its military forces within 18 months. All weapons technology must be submitted for council review. Permanent monitoring stations will be established in the Sol system to ensure compliance. This is outrageous. Dae-jung's voice cracked through the chamber. Centuries of diplomatic protocol dissolved in that moment. You ask us to make ourselves defenseless while pirates still prowl our borders. You ask us to trust council protection while your forces are spread thin across the galaxy. This is not about proportional defense. This is about control. Vextar's eyes narrowed to slits. Ambassador, you forget yourself. The council has maintained peace for 10,000 years. We know what we are doing. This is for humanity's own safety as much as it is for galactic stability. Safety? Dae-jung laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean you want us weak? You want us dependent on your protection so we never become a threat to your power? The chamber erupted in chaos. Some species shouted in support of the resolution. Others demanded Dae-jung be removed for insubordination. Through it all, Vextar remained calm, waiting for the noise to die down. When it finally did, he called for a vote. The counting took 10 minutes. Each species cast their vote through their delegation terminals. Daejung watched the numbers climb on the display board. Green lights for approval, red lights for rejection, yellow lights for abstention. The green lights outnumbered everything else. 647 votes in favor, 153 against, 92 abstentions. Resolution 8472 is passed. Humanity has 18 months to comply. Daejung stood frozen as the chamber began to empty. Other ambassadors avoided his eyes. A few offered sympathetic nods, but none spoke up. Fear kept them silent. Fear of standing against the council. Fear of being the next species targeted. Back on Earth, President Kim Hae-in received the news in her office overlooking the restored Pacific forests. She had been president for 6 years, elected on promises of peaceful coexistence with the galactic community. Now she faced an impossible choice. Compliance meant trusting the council with human lives. Resistance meant war against 800 species. She closed her eyes and tried to find an answer in the darkness behind her eyelids. Admiral Bo-Ra watched the vote from her command chair on Mars. Her officers stood around her, waiting for orders. She saw the anger in their faces. She felt it in her own chest, burning like a star about to explode. But Bo-Ra had learned patience in her years of service. She would comply with whatever orders came, but she would also prepare. History taught that those who trusted others for their protection often learned the lesson too late. Captain Taemin commanded the stealth ship Indomitable on patrol near the frontier sectors. His sensors had been picking up strange readings for weeks now. Energy signatures that did not match any known species. Movement patterns that suggested massive fleet formations. He had reported everything through proper channels, but his warnings were dismissed as equipment malfunctions. Tonight, the readings were stronger. Taemin stood on his bridge staring at the sensor displays. His crew worked quietly around him, running diagnostics, trying to make sense of the data. Whatever was out there, it was getting closer. And it was big. Very big, Captain, his sensor officer called out. I am detecting multiple displacement signatures. Whatever is out there just jumped to faster-than-light travel, heading toward inhabited sectors. Taemin transmitted an urgent message to Fleet Command. This is Captain Taemin of the Indomitable. Unknown contacts detected in Sector 447. Possible hostile fleet movement. Recommend immediate investigation. The response came back an hour later. Captain Taemin, your report has been noted. However, given the current political situation, we cannot authorize aggressive reconnaissance. Continue standard patrols. Command out. Taemin stared at the message in disbelief. Something was coming. He could feel it in his bones. But the Council wanted humanity passive. They wanted humans to trust in collective security. They wanted 800 species to protect what humans could not protect themselves. Far beyond the frontier, in the darkness between stars where light had not shone for millions of years, something ancient stirred. Biological ships the size of cities pulsed with organic life. A hive mind that had slept for 5,000 years now awakened, hungry and patient. The Kejori swarm had returned, and they had learned that the galaxy had grown soft in their absence. The scent of weakness drew them forward like blood. In water draws sharks. They had watched from the dark spaces. They had listened to the electromagnetic chatter. They knew the Council had just disarmed their most dangerous potential enemy. The timing was perfect. The feast would be glorious, and humanity, forced into compliance by a Council that feared them, would be too weak to fight back when the swarm arrived. Or so the Council thought. They had forgotten one crucial detail about humans. Humans had survived ice ages and plagues. They had climbed from caves to the stars, and throughout their entire history, they had never been very good at following orders that guaranteed their destruction. 6 months had passed since the Council vote. The dismantling of humanity's military had begun with mechanical efficiency. Warships that had protected colonies for decades now sat in orbital graveyards, waiting to be scrapped. Weapons were cataloged and shipped to Council storage facilities. Training bases fell silent as soldiers were reassigned to civilian duties or discharged entirely. Admiral Bo-Ra stood in the command center of Mars Station, watching another destroyer get towed away. The ship had served with distinction in the Outer Rim. It had saved thousands of lives. Now it was just another piece of metal being recycled. Each departure felt like watching a friend die. Overseer Kalvix moved through the station with rigid purpose. The Regellian had 4 arms and used all of them to check compliance documents, scan equipment logs, and mark items on his endless digital lists. He believed in order, he believed in rules, and he believed humanity was naturally chaotic, needing strict supervision to prevent disaster. Admiral Bora, Kalvix approached with 2 of his arms extended, holding data tablets. I require your authorization for the decommissioning schedule. We are 3 ships behind the timeline. This is unacceptable. Bora took the tablets without looking at them. My apologies, Overseer. The crews need time to transfer their personal belongings. Many of these soldiers have served on those ships for years. Sentiment does not appear in the compliance regulations. Please ensure we remain on schedule. Kalvix's crystalline eyes showed no sympathy. He had processed 16 species through disarmament procedures in his career. Humans were just another entry in his files. After the Overseer left, Bora allowed herself a moment of anger. Her hands clenched into fists. Her jaw tightened. Then she forced herself to breathe slowly. Anger was a luxury she could not afford. She had work to do. Secret work that Kalvix and his inspectors would never find. On Viridian Prime, Agent Cho Sung-ho had spent 3 months building trust with a council archivist named Felix. The elderly Pelleran loved talking about history, and appreciated that Sung-ho actually listened to his stories. Tonight, Felix had drunk too much Aldebaranian wine at a diplomatic reception and needed help getting back to his quarters. Sung-ho supported the old archivist through the corridors, listening to rambling stories about the good old days. Near the restricted archives section, Felix fumbled with his access crystal. I should update my credentials, he mumbled. This old thing barely works anymore. When Felix finally got his door open and collapsed onto his sleeping platform, Sung-ho pocketed the access crystal the archivist had dropped. It was a risk. If anyone noticed the crystal missing before Sung-ho could return it, his cover would be destroyed. But some risks were worth taking. 3 hours later, Sung-ho stood in the restricted archives. Holographic files floated around him in the darkness, organized by date and classification level. He searched for anything related to the proportional defense doctrine. What he found made his blood run cold. The files showed a pattern stretching back 50,000 years. 17 different species had been subjected to forced disarmament under similar circumstances. The reasons were always the same. Too aggressive, too militaristic, too dangerous to galactic stability. But the outcomes told a different story. 12 of those civilizations no longer existed. Their territories had been absorbed by council member states within decades of disarmament. The official records listed various causes for their collapse: internal conflicts, economic failures, natural disasters. But the timing was too convenient to be coincidence. 5 other species simply vanished from all records. No explanation, no historical footnotes, just gaps in the archives where civilizations used to be. Sung-ho copied everything to an encrypted storage device small enough to hide under his tongue. Then he carefully replaced the access crystal in Felix's quarters before dawn. The quantum transmission reached Ambassador Dae-jung within hours. He read the files in his private chambers, door locked, security systems disabled. Each page confirmed his worst suspicions. The council had done this before. They had perfected it over millennia. Target a rising power, force disarmament, wait for the inevitable conquest or collapse, maintain plausible deniability throughout. Dae-jung faced an impossible choice. If he revealed the conspiracy, humanity would be justified in resisting. But the council would respond with overwhelming force, and Earth was not ready for that fight. If he stayed silent, humanity would comply its way into extinction. He needed time. He needed options. He needed Admiral Bora. The encrypted message reached Mars Station through civilian communication channels. Bora read it 3 times, each reading making her more certain of what she had to do. She called a meeting of her most trusted officers in a shielded room deep in the station's core. Operation Chrysalis begins today, she told the 12 people gathered around the table. We comply with the letter of the Council's edict while violating its spirit. We convert civilian ships to military specifications. We hide weapons in commercial cargo. We train merchant crews who are actually soldiers. And we do it all while the overseers watch. Colonel Huang Da-un leaned forward. That will require significant resources. How do we move that much equipment without the inspectors noticing? We have allies in the civilian sector. Bo-Ra pulled up a holographic diagram. Engineer Park Min-seo has been designing dual-purpose ships for months. They look like cargo haulers. They fly like cargo haulers. But with 48 hours of work, they become warships. Park Min-seo worked at the Jupiter shipyards officially designing civilian vessels for the expanding colony trade. In reality, she was creating a shadow fleet. Each ship had modular sections where weapons could be installed. Each power system had military-grade capacity, hidden behind civilian specifications. Each hull was reinforced beyond what commercial use required. The overseers inspected her designs regularly. They found nothing suspicious. The ships met all civilian regulations. They passed every safety standard. Kalvix himself had approved 15 of her designs, noting in his reports that Engineer Park demonstrates proper adherence to peaceful commercial specifications. While Earth secretly prepared, Captain Taman continued his patrols in the frontier sectors. His ship had been reclassified as a cargo transport, but he kept his military crew together by listing them as merchant employees. They still ran combat drills when they were far enough from Council monitoring stations. The strange sensor readings grew stronger with each passing week. Taman had stopped reporting them after his first dozen warnings were ignored. Instead, he kept detailed logs and shared them through encrypted channels with Admiral Bo-Ra. Something was coming. Something big. And when it arrived, humanity needed to be ready, Council permission or not. On Earth, protests erupted in major cities. Citizens marched through streets holding signs demanding resistance. Some called for open rebellion against the Council. Others simply wanted their government to protect them. Presidised the planet via broadcast, urging patience and trust in the diplomatic process. Behind closed doors, she authorized Operation Chrysalis and prayed it would be enough. Meanwhile, in the darkest corners of the Council chambers, Councillor Thane met with Admiral Vakran of the Zelkor Dominion. The meeting was not recorded. No aides were present, just two beings discussing opportunities that might arise if humanity failed to comply fully with the disarmament edict. Human territories are resource-rich. Vakran hissed through his fanged mouth. Their colonies are well positioned for expansion. If they were to suffer some unfortunate incident during their weakened state, the Zelkor Dominion would be willing to provide stability in the region. Thane's crystalline body chunsel cannot officially support such actions. However, if the humans prove unable to maintain order in their own territories, intervention might become necessary. For their own protection, of course. Of course. Vakran's smile showed too many teeth. For their protection, the Zelkor fleet began mobilizing. Officially, they were conducting training exercises near their borders. Strategically, they positioned themselves within striking distance of human space. Vakran believed humanity would prove too weak or too proud to comply fully. Either way, opportunity would present itself. 3 months remained before the final compliance deadline. Admiral Bo-Ra had converted 40 civilian ships to hidden military specifications. Another 100 were in various stages of preparation. It was not enough to fight the entire Council, but it might be enough to defend humanity until diplomacy could find another path. Ambassador Dae-jung worked diplomatic channels tirelessly, building alliances with species that had voted against the resolution. He reminded them that today it was humanity facing disarmament. Tomorrow it might be their own species. Fear was a powerful motivator, but so was self-interest. If the Council could target humans without consequence, no one was safe. Young diplomat Yoon Ji-woo assisted Dae-jung by maintaining contact with Agent Sung-ho. The intelligence flowing from Viridian Prime painted a troubling picture. The Council was more divided than it appeared. Many species privately opposed the resolution, but feared speaking up. Others actively plotted to exploit human weakness. The galaxy was balanced on the edge of chaos, waiting for someone to tip it one way or another. In the frontier sectors, alarms suddenly scream. Captain Taman's ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Sector 447. What he saw through the view screen made his stomach turn. The research station was gone, not destroyed in the clean way that weapons cause destruction. This was different. This was organic. Massive biological structures had grown over the station's hull like a cancer. They pulsed with bioluminescent veins that glowed sickly green in the darkness of space. The metal framework was barely visible beneath the living tissue that consumed it. Nothing moved inside. There were no life signs. 50,000 people had simply ceased to exist. Lieutenant Baekye Jin worked her sensor console with frantic movements. Captain, I am detecting massive biological signatures. Ships, I think. But they are alive. Actually alive. They are surrounding us. Taemin saw them on the tactical display. Dozens of vessels appeared from behind the station's remains. They were shaped like nothing humanity had ever encountered. Organic hulls that looked like deep-sea creatures mixed with insect hives. Each one was the size of a city block, covered in what looked like armor plating made from chitin and bone. Weapons ports opened like mouths filled with teeth. Battle stations. Taemin's voice cut through the bridge. Deploy all weapons. Shields to maximum. Send everything we are seeing back to Fleet Command. If we do not make it out, at least they will know what killed us. The Kajori bioships moved with terrifying grace. They did not fly like mechanical vessels with thrusters and navigation systems. They swam through space like predators through water. 12 of them converged on Taemin's ship from different angles, coordinating their approach with the precision of a hive mind. The first attack came as streams of organic projectiles that splashed against the shields like acid. Warning alarm screamed through the bridge. Shields at 60%, someone shouted. That single volley took 40% of our defensive strength. Taemin gripped his command chair. Return fire. Target the largest vessels. Missiles free. Human-made torpedoes streaked toward the bioships. They were supposed to be decommissioned. They were supposed to be locked away in council storage. But Operation Chrysalis had ensured they were still here, still deadly. The warhead struck home, tearing through organic armor and exploding inside living flesh. One bioship shuddered and broke apart, spilling atmosphere and biological fluids into space. Another took damage but began regenerating almost immediately. The torn armor regrew like healing skin. The Kajori adapted in real time. The battle became a dance of death. Taemin used every tactical trick he had learned in 20 years of service. He flew his ship through debris fields using destroyed station fragments as cover. He fired when the enemy expected evasion, and evaded when they expected aggression. His crew worked with the efficiency that came from training that officially did not exist. They destroyed 4 bioships. But the cost was terrible. Hull breaches on 3 decks. Casualties in engineering. Shields failing. The remaining Kajori vessels pressed their advantage, surrounding the human ship from all directions. We cannot win this fight, Lieutenant Bayek admitted, her voice tight with stress. We need to retreat. Get us out of here, Taemin ordered. But keep scanning. I want every piece of data about these things we can gather. Someone else will have to finish this fight. We need to make sure they know what they are facing. The ship's faster-than-light drive engaged with a painful shudder. Reality bent around them as they escaped into the safety of compressed space. Behind them, the Kajori swarm did not pursue. They had learned what they needed to learn about human capabilities. Now they would adapt. Now they would improve. The data transmission reached the Galactic Council chambers within hours. High Chancellor Vextar watched the combat footage with growing dread. The biological ships, the hive coordination, the regenerative abilities, every detail matched ancient records from 5,000 years ago. Records he had hoped were exaggerated legends. Records that spoke of a threat that nearly destroyed the galaxy. But Overseer Kalvik saw something different. This footage is clearly fabricated, he announced to the emergency council session. The Kajori have been extinct for millennia. This is human propaganda designed to justify their illegal military activities. Councillor Thane nodded agreement.
The humans have been caught maintaining hidden weapons.
They engaged in unauthorized combat operations. This convenient enemy appearing just as they face consequences for their violations is too suspicious to believe. Ambassador Dae-jung stood before the council, exhausted from emergency transport but burning with righteous anger. You are condemning billions to death because of your pride. Captain Taemin risked his life to bring you this warning. 50,000 beings died on that station, but you would rather believe in conspiracy than face the truth. The council dissolved into chaos. Species shouted accusations and counter-accusations. Some demanded humanity be punished for breaking the disarmament agreement. Others called for investigation of the footage. A few, including Ambassador Lyra of the Novari Collective, stood and declared their belief in the human warning. Her species had survived the first HFY War. They remembered what denial cost. On Earth, President Kim Hae-in faced the moment she had dreaded, Admiral Bora stood in her office along with her entire cabinet. The choice was simple but brutal. Continue dismantling humanity's defenses while an existential threat approached, or violate the Council Edict and risk sanctions, isolation, or war with 800 species. Show me what we have, Kim said quietly. Bora activated a holographic display. 200 ships appeared as blue dots scattered across human space. They were listed as civilian vessels in all official documents. Cargo haulers, colony transports, mining ships. But with 48 hours of work, they could become humanity's last line of defense. Additionally, we have retained approximately 30,000 military personnel disguised as civilian crew members. We have weapons caches hidden in asteroid mining facilities. We have training bases operating under the cover of industrial operations. We are not as weak as the Council believes. Kim looked at each person in the room. If we activate these forces, there is no going back. The Council will view it as rebellion. We will stand alone. We already stand alone, Bora replied. The Council refused our warning. They care more about maintaining control than protecting their citizens. If we wait for their permission to defend ourselves, we will die waiting. President Kim closed her eyes and thought about the billions of humans across dozens of worlds who trusted her to keep them safe. She thought about the research station that died because no one was close enough to help. She thought about what her successor would think of her decision, assuming humanity survived to have successors. Do it, she said. Activate Operation Defiance. We will protect the frontier sectors that the Council cannot reach in time, and if they want to punish us for saving lives, let them try. Within 48 hours, humanity's shadow fleet revealed itself. Civilian ships docked at hidden facilities where weapons were installed with practiced efficiency. Engineer Park Min-seo's designs proved their worth as modular military systems clicked into place. Ships that looked like cargo haulers emerged as warships capable of standing against any threat. The Council learned of humanity's defiance through their monitoring stations in Sol system. Overseer Kalvix nearly short-circuited his translation device with outrage. Emergency sessions were called. Sanctions were discussed. But before any action could be taken, the Kajori struck again. Colony Epsilon 7 was home to 2 million beings from a dozen different species. It was a frontier world, far from the core sectors, valued for its mineral deposits and agricultural production. The local defense force consisted of 20 ships from various council species, maintaining order and watching for pirates. The Kajori swarm arrived without warning. Hundreds of bioships appeared in orbit, blotting out the sun. The defenders engaged immediately, firing every weapon they had. But conventional tactics meant nothing against an enemy that adapted and regenerated. Within an hour, 15 defender ships were destroyed. The survivors transmitted desperate pleas for help. The nearest council forces were 6 days away. The colony would fall in hours. 2 million people would die while the council debated jurisdiction and proper response protocols. But humanity was only 3 hours away. Captain Jinnah commanded the human task force that answered the call. She had volunteered for this mission knowing it would make her a criminal in the council's eyes. She did not care. People needed help. She had ships and weapons and the training to use them. Everything else was just politics. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a tactical formation that surprised the Kajori. Instead of engaging directly, Jinnah split her forces into rapid strike groups. They hit the swarm from multiple angles, targeting the coordination nodes that Lieutenant Bayek's analysis had identified as critical to hive communication. The Kajori adapted quickly, but humans adapted faster. When bioships developed thermal resistance, Jinnah switched to kinetic weapons that punched through organic armor with pure force. When the swarm tried to surround her ships, she used the planet's gravity well to slingshot her forces into unexpected positions. When they deployed some kind of biological jamming, she fell back on manual coordination and visual signals. The battle was brutal. Humans lost 15 ships and took heavy casualties, but they held the line. They created a corridor through which civilian transports could evacuate the colony. 2 million people escaped because 300 humans decided that council rules mattered less than lives. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Citizens on hundreds of worlds watched footage of human ships fighting desperately to save a colony that was not even theirs. They watched humans sacrifice themselves to protect Peloran families, Rigelian workers, and Novari children. Questions began to be asked. Uncomfortable questions about council priorities and the true meaning of collective security. In the council chambers, the mood shifted. Species from frontier worlds demanded humanity be thanked, not punished. Others pointed out that the Kayori were clearly real and clearly dangerous. A few pragmatists suggested that maybe, just maybe, they needed human military expertise more than they needed to maintain their pride. But not everyone agreed. The Zelkor Dominion, which had positioned forces near human space anticipating weakness, now faced an unexpected problem. Humanity was not weak. They were angry, organized, and demonstrably effective. Admiral Vakarin watched the battle recordings and realized his species had made a terrible miscalculation. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Bayekye Jin worked through data from both battles, searching for patterns in the Kajori movements. What she discovered chilled her to the core. The attacks were not random. The swarm was following specific routes through space, targeting locations that matched ancient star charts. They were navigating somewhere specific. She cross-referenced their trajectory with galactic maps. The answer appeared on her screen like a death sentence. The Kajori were heading toward the core sectors, toward the most heavily populated regions of the galaxy, toward Earth, Viridian Prime, and the homeworlds of every major council species. The attacks on the frontier were not the war. They were reconnaissance. The real invasion would begin in 30 days. Beck transmitted her findings to Admiral Bora and Ambassador Daejung simultaneously. The message was clear. The Council could continue debating human compliance, or they could prepare to fight for their survival. But they could not do both. Time had run out. The Kajori were coming, and when they arrived, every species would face a simple choice: stand together or die alone. The emergency session of the Galactic Council lasted for 3 days. All 800 species sent their representatives. The chamber had never been so crowded or so loud. Lieutenant Bayekye Jin's analysis played on holographic displays for everyone to see. The Kajori trajectory was undeniable. The timeline was terrifying. 30 days until the swarm reached the core sectors where trillions of beings lived. Ambassador Daejung stood at the center of the chamber, older and more tired than when this crisis began, but his voice carried the weight of someone who had nothing left to lose. He did not plead. He did not beg. He simply stated facts. The Council can choose to stand together, or you can die separately. Humanity offers our military expertise, our tactical knowledge, and our willingness to fight. We offer this despite being labeled criminals for the act of saving lives. We offer this because survival matters more than pride. High Chancellor Vextar slithered forward. For the first time in his 300 years of leadership, he looked uncertain. What guarantee do we have that humanity will not use this crisis to seize power? That you will not turn your weapons on us once the threat has passed? Daejung met his eyes without flinching. You have no guarantee except our word. The same word you doubted when we warned you about the Kajori. The same word you ignored when we explained our need for self-defense. But here's a better question. What choice do you have? The chamber fell silent. The truth was brutal and simple. The Council's military forces were scattered across the galaxy. It would take weeks to assemble them. Weeks they did not have. Their collective security had been designed for dealing with pirates and minor conflicts, not an extinction-level threat. They needed humanity, and everyone knew it. Ambassador Lyra of the Novari Collective stood. Her crystalline form chimed softly in the quiet chamber. Her species had survived the first Kajori War 5,000 years ago, but barely. They remembered what hesitation cost. My ancestors faced this enemy when we were young as a civilization. They did not win through strength alone. They won by learning from those who knew how to fight. The humans have shown us they know how to fight. Pride killed millions of Novari before we accepted help. I will not let pride kill billions now. I vote to grant humanity emergency military authority. Her words broke the dam. Species after species stood to speak. Some reluctantly acknowledged the necessity. Others enthusiastically supported human leadership. A few still resisted, but their voices grew quieter as the reality of their situation became clear. The vote took hours. When it finally concluded, the results appeared on every screen. 421 species voted in favor of granting humanity temporary emergency military authority and rescinding the disarmament edict. 287 voted against. 92 abstained. It passed. Admiral Bora received authorization to establish Central Defense Command. She chose a decommissioned military station called Stronghold as her headquarters. Within days, ships from hundreds of species began arriving. The assembly was chaos. Different technologies that did not interface properly. Different languages that translation devices struggled to handle. Different tactical doctrines that contradicted each other. And underlying it all, generations of mistrust and prejudice. Bora stood in the command center and surveyed the nightmare she had inherited. Over 5,000 ships from 200 different species, all needing to work together against an enemy that could adapt to anything they tried. She took a deep breath and got to work. Human officers dispersed throughout the fleet, serving as tactical advisors and trainers. Colonel Huang Da-un worked with Morvathian weapons crews, teaching them how to integrate their devastating long-range cannons with human targeting computers. The Morvathians resisted at first, insulted by the implication that they needed help. Then they saw the accuracy improvements and stopped complaining. General Nam Hoseok trained Rigelian Marines in close-quarters combat techniques. The Rigelians had forearms and natural strength advantages, but they fought with predictable patterns developed over centuries of tradition. Nam taught them improvisation and adaptive tactics. They learned quickly once pride stopped getting in the way. Captain Jinnah worked with Peleran pilots who had never flown aggressive maneuvers. Their culture valued caution and precision. She showed them how aggression could be a tool when used correctly. How sometimes the best defense was not a better shield but a more decisive attack. The Pelerans were shocked by human tactics, but they could not argue with the results. Not all cooperation went smoothly. There were fights, arguments, incidents where cultural misunderstandings nearly led to violence. But slowly, grudgingly, the alliance began to function. When a Rigelian crew was trapped behind enemy lines during a training exercise, human medics risked themselves to extract them. When human pilots pushed their ships too hard and suffered system failures, Peleran engineers worked through the night to repair them. Respect grew from shared struggle. The Zelkor Dominion presented a unique problem. Their fleet had been mobilizing for an opportunistic attack on human space. Now they needed humanity's help to survive. Admiral Vakrin was dead, killed in a disastrous attempt to harvest Kajori biotechnology. The surviving Zelkor forces, humbled and desperate, requested asylum with the Alliance. Admiral Bora accepted them despite vocal opposition from both humans and aliens. She assigned Captain Taemin to command a joint human-Zelkor squadron. The two groups despised each other. Zelkor warriors viewed humans as inferior. Humans remembered how the Zelkor had circled like vultures waiting for them to weaken, but both were professional soldiers who understood necessity. Sub-Commander Krixal led the Zelkor contingent. He was a veteran of dozens of campaigns and deeply prejudiced against soft species like humans. But he was also intelligent enough to recognize talent. Watching Taemin coordinate the squadron during training exercises forced him to admit, if only to himself, that humans were not as weak as Zelkor propaganda claimed. Meanwhile, Engineer Park Min-seo worked miracles at Stronghold. She coordinated the integration of technologies that should not have been compatible. Peleran shields powered by human reactors, Morvathian weapons fed by Rigelian energy systems. Ships that could barely communicate now fought as unified strike groups. It was not elegant, but it worked. As the deadline approached, Admiral Bora established defensive positions at the Helion Gate. The region was a natural bottleneck where compressed space created narrow passage routes. It was the best place to make a stand. If they failed here, the Kajori would have clear passage to the populated core sectors. The night before the expected Kajori arrival, Bora addressed the fleet via open channel. Her words were translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. Species that had never heard of each other listened to a human tell them they could survive. Tomorrow we face an enemy that nearly destroyed the galaxy once before. They are strong. They are numerous. They adapt to everything we throw at them. But they have one weakness. They cannot understand what drives us. They are a hive mind that thinks only of survival and consumption. They cannot comprehend the idea of protecting someone other than yourself. They cannot understand sacrifice. They cannot understand hope. And those things make us stronger than they will ever be. The sensors detected the Kajori 12 hours early. Millions of bioships emerged from faster-than-light travel in a formation that stretched across space like a living wall. The Vanguard alone outnumbered the Alliance fleet 3-1. But Admiral Bora had not positioned her forces for a fair fight. She had positioned them for a smart fight. The battle began with the Pellerin shields absorbing the first Kajori assault. The bioship's organic against the barriers that had been reinforced with human dispersal technology. Behind the shields, Morvathian dreadnoughts charged their long-range cannons. The weapons fired in perfect coordination, guided by human targeting computers that predicted enemy movements with unprecedented accuracy. Human carriers deployed fighter wings that swarmed through Kajori formations like angry insects. The pilots flew with aggressive tactics that confused the hive mind's predictive patterns. They targeted coordination nodes that Lieutenant Bayek had identified as critical to swarm communication. Each node destroyed caused temporary chaos in local Kajori formations. General Nam Hoseok led boarding teams onto damaged bioships. The interior environments were nightmarish, organic corridors that pulsed like digestive tracts, defense systems that were literally alive and hungry, but the mixed-species marine teams fought with determination born from training together. Rigelian strength combined with human tactics proved devastatingly effective. The Kajori adapted quickly. Their bioships developed thermal resistance to human weapons. Engineer Park Min-seo watched the battlefield data and immediately transmitted new targeting protocols. Within minutes, the entire fleet switched to cryo-weapons that exploited different vulnerabilities. When the swarm began jamming communications, she rerouted everything through quantum-entangled networks that could not be intercepted. Captain Taemin and Sub-Commander Krixal fought side by side in their squadron. When Taemin's ship took critical damage, Krixal's vessel moved to cover his retreat. When Zelkor's ships became surrounded, human fighters broke through. Lieutenant Bayek Yejin worked frantically at her station, analyzing every second of the battle. Somewhere in the data was the answer they needed. Somewhere in the patterns was a weakness they could exploit. She just had to find it before time ran out. Before the real war began. Before billions died because she was not smart enough or fast enough to save them. Lieutenant Baek Yejin had not slept in 48 hours. Her eyes burned. Her hands shook from too much caffeine and adrenaline, but she could not stop. Somewhere in the battle data was the answer. Somewhere in the patterns was the weakness that would save billions of lives. She watched the footage of Ambassador Lyra's sacrifice for the 100th time, the Eternal Vigil ramming the Queen vessel, the massive explosion, and then for exactly 4.7 seconds, the surrounding Kajori formations froze. They did not attack. They did not maneuver. They simply stopped as if something had interrupted their coordination. "That is it," she whispered. "That is the weakness." She called for Admiral Bora and Engineer Park Min-seo. When they arrived at her station, exhausted but alert, she showed them what she had found. The Kajori operated as a hive mind coordinated through biological neural networks spread across their entire fleet. Destroy a regular bioship and the network adapted around it. But destroy a Queen vessel and the network needed time to reboot. 4.7 seconds where the swarm was vulnerable. "We cannot just destroy one Queen," Beck explained. "They have hundreds. But what if we destroyed them all simultaneously? What if we overloaded the entire neural network at once?" Park Min-seo stared at the data. The coordination required would be impossible. We would need to hit hundreds of targets across 20 light-years of space within a 3-second window. Miss one Queen vessel and the hive mind will adapt permanently to this tactic. "Not impossible," Bora said quietly. "Just extremely difficult." Which is exactly the kind of thing humans specialize in. Operation Singularity was born from desperation and innovation. The plan was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. 847 strike teams would hit every identified Queen vessel and major coordination node simultaneously. The timing had to be perfect. The synchronization had to be flawless. There was no room for error. Admiral Bora presented the plan to the Alliance leadership. High Chancellor Vextar listened with growing concern. Councillor Thane calculated the probability of success and came up with 12%. Other species representatives questioned whether risking the entire fleet on such a desperate gambit was wise. Ambassador Dae-jung spoke into the silence. "We have two choices. We can fortify the core worlds and watch the Kajori slowly consume the galaxy while we hide behind our walls. Or we can attack with everything we have and end this war in one decisive strike. The first option guarantees slow death. The second offers a chance at survival. I know which one I choose." The vote was close. 433 species approved. 367 rejected or abstained. But it was enough. Operation Singularity was authorized. Humanity would lead the most ambitious military operation in galactic history. Engineer Park Min-seo worked miracles to make the impossible possible. She developed quantum-linked targeting systems that could synchronize attacks across vast distances with microsecond precision. The technology was experimental and untested at this scale. But there was no time for proper trials. They would test it in combat or die trying. The strike teams assembled. Each consisted of ships from multiple species working under human tactical coordination. Captain Taemin commanded Strike Team Alpha, assigned to the largest Queen vessel. Sub-Commander Crixall volunteered to serve as his second. The Zelkor warrior had learned to respect human capabilities. Now he would trust them with his life. Captain Jinnah led a deep penetration squadron tasked with the most dangerous assignment. They would punch through the heart of the Kajori Formation to reach coordination nodes protected by thousands of bioships. It was essentially a suicide mission. Every pilot in her squadron knew it. They volunteered anyway. General Nam Ho-seok coordinated boarding teams across the fleet. Marines from dozens of species prepared to fight through organic nightmares to plant charges in bioship cores. They trained together, ate together, and shared last messages for their families. Species barriers dissolved in the face of shared mortality. 72 hours after the Battle of Helion Gate, the Kaijori main swarm arrived. The bioships filled space like a living ocean, millions of them, more than sensors could accurately count. They had adapted to every tactic the Alliance used in the previous battle. They came expecting to overwhelm through numbers and superior evolution, but the Alliance did not fight defensively this time. Admiral Bora ordered an all-out attack. Every ship, every fighter, every weapon. They pushed forward with reckless aggression that confused the Kajori hive mind. The swarm had expected the Alliance to defend positions. Instead, they charged directly into the teeth of the enemy formation. The chaos was indescribable. Ships exploded. Bioships regenerated. Fighters swarmed like angry insects. Boarding teams cut their way through organic corridors filled with hostile immune systems. Communications were jammed. Casualties mounted. But the strike teams kept pushing toward their targets. Strike Team Alpha reached the primary Queen vessel, but found it protected by a bioshield that regenerated faster than they could damage it. Captain Taemin and Sub-Commander Crixall argued over strategy via crackling communication channels. "We need to ram it," Crixall insisted. "Create a gap in the shield. My ship will do it while my crew evacuates." "Negative," Taemin replied. "I will not let you sacrifice your people. We do this together or not at all." They compromised. Both ships would ram the shield simultaneously. Both crews would evacuate to fighters at the last possible second. It was risky and probably stupid, but it was the only option that gave everyone a chance to survive. The two vessels accelerated toward the Queen vessel in perfect synchronization. Their crews evacuated into small fighters that barely qualified as escape pods. At the last second, both captains set the autopilots and ejected. The ships struck the bioshield together, and the combined impact overwhelmed the regenerative capacity. The shield collapsed. Captain Jinnah's deep penetration squadron suffered terrible losses. Half her ships were destroyed fighting through layers of defensive bioships. Her own vessel took critical damage from organic projectiles that ate through the hull like acid, but she pushed forward. When her engines failed, she manually piloted a torpedo into the coordination node and ejected in an escape pod, seconds before detonation. General Nam Ho-seok's Marines fought nightmares made real. The bioship interiors actively tried to digest them. Organic tendrils grabbed at armored suits. Acidic fluids sprayed from walls. Immune system creatures the size of tanks attacked with biological fury. But mixed species teams fought together with the coordination born from shared training. They planted their charges and extracted casualties while fighting every step of the way. On Stronghold, Engineer Park Min-seo monitored 847 separate operations simultaneously. Strike teams reported readiness one by one. Some were ahead of schedule. Others were behind. She made real-time adjustments, rerouting support to struggling teams. Lieutenant Baek Ye-jin tracked Kajori responses, updating target priorities as Queen vessels shifted positions. 847 targets. 20 light-years of space, 3-second synchronization window. Park initiated the final countdown sequence. Her hands trembled as she activated the quantum link. Every strike team across the battlefield received the synchronization signal simultaneously. Every weapon, every explosive, every torpedo locked onto their designated targets. Park whispered a prayer to mathematics and physics. "Please let this work." She pressed the activation control. Across the battlefield, 847 strikes executed within 2.1 seconds of each other. Torpedoes slammed into queen vessels. Charges detonated in coordination nodes. Focused fire tore through neural clusters. The synchronization was not perfect, but it was close enough. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Kajori hive mind, attempting to process the simultaneous loss of so many critical nodes, simply overloaded. Bioships froze in mid-flight. Coordination collapsed. The unified intelligence that had terrorized the galaxy fractured into millions of confused individual organisms. Some bioships attacked each other in confusion. Others fled randomly in all directions. The largest queen vessel, its neural core destroyed, began breaking apart as structural integrity failed without the hive mind's coordination. What had been an organized swarm became a scattered mess of biological debris. The Alliance fleet, battered and bleeding but alive, moved through the chaos in disbelief. They had won. Against impossible odds, against an enemy that adapted to everything, they had won. Lieutenant Bayek Yejin confirmed what everyone hoped was true. The hive mind was gone. The neural collapse was permanent and irreversible. The cost was terrible. Over 2,000 ships destroyed, hundreds of thousands dead. Entire squadrons vanished. Every species mourned their heroes. But they had survived. And the galaxy was safe. 10 days after the battle, the Galactic Council reconvened. This time there was no debate about human intentions. High Chancellor Vextar addressed the assembly with unusual humility. His voice, translated into 800 languages, carried words no one expected to hear. "We owe humanity an apology. We feared their strength when we should have embraced it. We nearly destroyed ourselves with our prejudice. We forced them to fight with one hand tied behind their backs, and still they saved us. The Council was wrong. I was wrong, and I propose we make sure such mistakes never happen again." Resolution 8472 was rescinded unanimously. More than that, the Council established the Mutual Defense Charter. Species would be encouraged to maintain strong defenses as a safeguard, not punished for them. The Proportional Defense Doctrine, which had kept the galaxy complacent for 10,000 years, was reformed from its foundation. Admiral Bora was offered the position of Supreme Commander of Allied Defense Forces, a newly created role overseeing integrated multi-species military operations. She accepted on the condition that command authority was shared equally among species. No single civilization would dominate. The alliance would be built on cooperation, not hierarchy. Captain Tae-min and Subcommander Krixal became unlikely friends. Together they wrote a tactical manual, combining human and Zelkor military philosophy. It became required reading at the new Galactic War Academy, where officers from all species trained together to face future threats as unified forces. Engineer Park Min-seo received the Council's highest civilian honor. She used her influence to establish cross-species engineering exchanges. Technology that had been hoarded for competitive advantage was now shared for mutual benefit. Innovation accelerated across the galaxy. Lieutenant Bayek Yejin became director of the Swarm Studies Institute, dedicated to ensuring extinction-level threats were detected early and countered decisively. Her work became the foundation for the galaxy's early warning system that monitored the dark spaces where ancient threats might still hide. Ambassador Daijung retired from active diplomacy, but accepted appointment as the Council's ethics advisor. His job was to question decisions and challenge assumptions, to make sure prejudice and fear never again clouded galactic judgment. He took the position seriously, never hesitating to speak uncomfortable truths. 5 years after the war, the galaxy had transformed in ways no one expected. The Council still governed, but with reformed principles based on cooperation rather than control. Mixed-species military units patrolled the frontier using tactics developed from human doctrine. Former enemies trained together, fought together, and built friendships that transcended their species. On Earth, a memorial was erected listing every name of every being who died defending the galaxy, human and alien alike. The inscription was simple but powerful. It spoke of unity forged in fire, of strength tempered with wisdom, of the simple truth that standing together was always stronger than standing apart. Admiral Bora stood in her office on the Alliance headquarters station, gazing at stars that now represented hope instead of threats. High Chancellor Vextar visited her there one afternoon, moving slowly with age that even his species could not escape. "You know," he said quietly, "when we first forbade your species from war, we thought we were protecting the galaxy. We were fools." Bora smiled slightly. "You were afraid. Fear makes everyone foolish sometimes. The important thing is learning from those mistakes." "What will humanity do now?" Vexitar asked. "With all this power and respect you have earned?" Bora looked at him steadily. "The same thing we have always done. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. We will adapt to new challenges. We will survive. And we will keep proving that war, while terrible, is sometimes the only path to lasting peace." Through the viewport, new warships launched from orbital shipyards. They were beautiful vessels that combined human design philosophy with alien technology. Mixed crews from dozens of species worked together as naturally as if they had always been one people. The galaxy had learned its lesson through blood and sacrifice. Unity was not found by forcing everyone to be the same. It was found by embracing what each species brought to the whole. The Pelleran taught patience, the Morvathians taught precision, the Rigelians taught strength, and humanity taught something the galaxy had forgotten in 10,000 years of peace. They taught that sometimes the willingness to fight was what made peace possible. The Council had tried to forbid humans from war for galactic safety, but they learned the hard way that safety did not come from weakness enforced by rules. It came from strength tempered by wisdom. It came from the willingness to stand together against darkness. It came from beings who understood that the most dangerous thing you could do was underestimate those willing to fight for what they loved. And so the galaxy entered a new age. One where humans were not feared for their capacity for war, but valued for their refusal to surrender. Where strength was seen as a tool for protection, rather than a threat to peace. Where 800 species learned to trust each other because they had faced extinction together and survived. The Kaijori would not return. But other threats would emerge eventually. They always did. The difference was that now the galaxy was ready, united, prepared, and led by a species that understood what the Council had forgotten. That peace was not the absence of war. It was the presence of people willing to fight for something worth protecting. Ambassador Daijong recorded one final message before his retirement. It was archived in the Council's historical records where future generations could find it. His words were simple, but carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. To whoever reads this in the future, remember that we nearly destroyed ourselves not through war, but through fear of those who knew how to fight. Remember that unity requires accepting differences, not erasing them. Remember that the strongest civilizations are not those who avoid conflict, but those who know when conflict is necessary and fight with honor when it comes. And remember that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is not the one with weapons, but the one who refuses to prepare for danger until it is too late. The galaxy remembered, and it survived. Not because they forbade war, but because they learned when war was necessary and how to wage it together. The Council had thought they were protecting themselves from humanity. Instead, humanity had saved them from themselves. It was the most human thing they could have done.